What's up everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or if you're new, welcome to Curious World of I, who is me, Leon, just here sharing my self-discovery journey with others through travel, spirituality, mindset, and thought-provoking conversations, and much more. Today's video, it will be around a review of the One Love Bob Marley biopic. Now, I'm a huge fan of Bob Marley, and I knew that I wanted to review this movie on my channel. But today is March 13th, and it's been about a month since the movie's been out, and I just came back from seeing it for the second time. I wanted to see it one time, let it sit for a little bit, find some time to see it again before I do a review, because I know in the world of content creation, a lot of people want to be first, especially while things are trending. But in my world, Bob Marley's always trending. There's never not a time to talk about Bob Marley and his message. So if you haven't seen the movie, there will be spoiler alerts. But if you don't really care for all that, you just want to get kind of a review of the movie before potentially going to watch it. Now, I will say the movie, the website IMDb gave it a 6.5 out of 10. And Rotten Tomato gave it a 43%. Now, let's forget whatever those people's opinions are, and I would say do not let that deter you from going to see the movie if you have not seen it yet. And so the way I want to do this video, I'm going to just give a real quick overview of my opinion on the movie, and then I'm going to dive a little bit deeper. For those that want to stick around, join the conversation on what they thought about the movie, or maybe if you agree with some of my review or observations about the movie, or even if you disagree, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Let's talk about it in the comments for all the people that love Bob Marley and enjoyed this movie. So to go ahead and jump into it, I will say this first. I did go to Jamaica back in July of 2023, and I was there 2 weeks right after they just finished filming this movie in Trenchtown. So the city was buzzing. I got to learn a lot about Bob Marley. If you love to see more about that experience, I highly recommend you to go see my Jamaica travel vlog. And then also, I want to shout out my man Cash with Inner City Tours, who took me around Trenchtown and showed me a lot of the day-to-day life of Bob Marley when he was living in Trenchtown. So if you happen to find yourself in Kingston, Jamaica, I highly recommend you to check out Inner City Tours. So let's go ahead and jump into this review. So I would just go ahead and say I really enjoyed this movie. It was a great movie. I think they did really good at executing what they wanted to execute. Now, I looked at interviews prior to the movie being released on Valentine's Day by Ziggy Marley, who is Bob Marley's son, who helped produce the movie, and also Kingsley Benadir and Lashana Lynch, who Kingsley played Bob and Lashana played Rita in the movie. And one of the things that they kept saying that they wanted to show in this movie was the emotional side of Bob, the side that you're not going to really get when, you know, behind the major events of his life that a lot of us know took place, and also who was the man behind the music. Now, I will say this, if you're somebody that knows a lot about Bob, you're probably going into this movie with certain expectations, and we all know with biopics, you can't make everybody happy. Somebody's going to find a critique of any biopic, because the people that have biopics about their lives, a lot of them are very complex people, and you're not going to be able to get it all into one movie. You might miss some things or might have to leave some things out. But to those that don't know much about Bob Marley, and this was an entry point, I would highly recommend for you, if you want to know more about Bob Marley, is to watch the documentary that his son Ziggy, who also produced this movie, made, which is named Marley. It's a 3-hour documentary that starts from the beginning to the end of Bob Marley's life in a very thorough fashion. When I watched it, it was a very moving very moving documentary, and I already knew and was really already fell in love with his music, but it really helped me to fall more in love in terms of the inspiration that Bob Marley was through watching that documentary. But overall, one of the things, like I said, they wanted to show this emotional side of Bob. I felt they did a good job at keeping it in one time frame, which was the Smile Jamaica tour, the Smile Jamaica concert, where Bob was already kind of this major success in Jamaica, but maybe not quite globally, to the One Love Peace concert, where he was bringing unity between two political parties that were at war with one another. And then also overall, there's some people you could look at the movie and also say, in terms of critique, that the movie was a little bit thin, that it maybe could have been a little bit longer or gone a little bit more in depth. But I do think they generally did a good job at trying to touch on a lot of aspects of Bob in little ways and then also large ways. And again, for those people who know a lot about Bob Marley, who probably went into the movie with high expectations, again, it's really hard to fulfill all of that overall in a biopic. Now, maybe another critique is that some people would say that the movie felt a little anticlimactic. Now, I will agree that when I first watched it, it did kind of feel that way, but I had to go and watch it a second time, and I really kind of looked at it from a different lens of like, really, what are they trying to achieve in this movie? And one of the things it seems like they're trying to achieve is to promote the message of Bob Marley, which was one of peace. Now, that's one aspect of Bob Marley. Now, in terms of a critique, some people would say they missed out on some other aspects, like the revolutionary side to Bob Marley. Now, again, if you were just curious about the overall movie, that's kind of my general idea of the movie. I thought the movie was enjoyable. I like how they integrated his music into throughout the entire movie. They gave you that. They also gave you kind of more the intimate moments of him, and I think they were very successful in that. I think Kingsley, based on interviews, he did a lot of research because he wanted to really give an aspect to Bob that a lot of people may not get in the music or watching his interviews, and I think they did a very successful job at doing that. Now, to dive a little bit deeper into my opinions and thoughts on the movies, which I would love for you guys to join in, share your thoughts and opinions on the movie, your love for Bob, or even if you agree or disagree with some of my critiques and some of my reviews in terms of what I saw in watching the movie. Now, the first thing, and I jotted a few points down. Now, the first thing I want to say about the movie is that what you're seeing when you're watching this Bob Marley One Love biopic is that you're seeing a spiritual group known as Rastafari or Rastas being displayed on the big screen, and its culture and its beliefs on the big screen. Now, going to Jamaica and even going to a Rasta village, going to the School of Vision up in the Blue Mountains in Kingston and learning more about Rasta and the history of Rasta, knowing that Rastas, as you even saw in the movie, suffered a lot of persecution during that time. So it wasn't like a good thing to be a Rasta. Rasta wasn't really a very welcoming culture in Jamaica at that time. You even see that in the movie when Bob Marley gets stopped by the police at that checkpoint and they try to drag him out their car, and the guy makes a comment, the fact that he has dreadlocks, right? And so the fact that we've gone from there to having a movie that is showing Rasta culture, Rasta symbolisms, Rasta ideologies, which one of them is peace and unity and love for all people on the big screen, I think is a huge step forward for the culture. I don't know how many Rastas feel about the movie, but I thought that was a huge step to see that, to spread the message once more, as Bob Marley did when he was alive, of Rasta. And I was also thoroughly surprised and enjoyed the fact that they included Mortimer Plano in the movie, and that was Bob Marley's spiritual teacher. He was the older gentleman with the really long locks that was having these sidebar conversations with him. I believe his first line in the movie was the fact that after he got shot, that Babylon and Rasta cannot mix, so it's not going to work. I think that was, I'm paraphrasing his first line there. But Mortimer Plano is a very interesting figure in Trenchtown, and I highly recommend you to learn a little bit more about him when you have the time. But he was basically responsible for converting a lot of the people in Trenchtown into Rasta, which is what you saw with Rita, what you saw with Bob, Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, and these were the original Wailers, which we saw a clip when they went back in time when they were auditioning to sign a record deal or to create a record, which was Simmer Down. But Mortimer Plano was a huge inspirational factor in Bob Marley's life and the source of where he got a lot of his understanding of Rasta, which was preached in every single message. In fact, I learned when I was there in Jamaica that during the One Love Peace concert where he had Michael Manley and Norman, I'm forgetting the other gentleman's name, but the two political parties come on stage and hold hands. What was told to me in Jamaica on the history of Bob, that it was Mortimer Plano who basically advised Bob Marley to do that, as Bob Marley went to him for advice, which he did not know really what to do to really bring about a symbol of peace. So that's how influential he was. So I was really excited the fact that they did show him in the movie, and showing Rasta culture, the use of cannabis, the Nyabingi drumming, the chalice, the dreadlocks. I just think is a huge step forward for the culture, the fact that that was put onto a big screen and broadcast all around the world. Other aspect to the movie that I did really enjoy, that I felt like I learned something a little bit more about Bob Marley, because I definitely did not go into this movie like, oh, I'm gonna learn something new about Bob Marley. But one thing that I did take away from this movie was kind of the inner thinking of Bob Marley, right? One thing that they wanted to show, right? The intimate side of Bob, and maybe what was fueling him to be this influential, inspiring, revolutionary figure. And I like how they, throughout the movie, repeatedly kind of showed this scene of this burning field and an unknown person on a horse, which, based on the photo of when they went back in time where Rita was looking at a photo of a white man on a horse, which Bob was saying that was my father, but I really don't know him. I think the fact that they kept repeating that was potentially showing that maybe a lot of what was fueling him was the fact that he didn't know his father, and that he was half white, and that he was a bit of an outcast. And maybe that's what fueled him towards this message of unity and peace and love and acceptance. And Kingsley, in doing his research, as he said in the interview, was that he noticed in every film of Bob Marley performing live, he always performed with his eyes closed. He always sang for his eyes closed. In fact, he said that every time Bob sang, he was singing for his life, to escape poverty, to escape struggle, to escape all these sufferings that he was experiencing throughout his life. And I think they did a good job at alluding to that. And it made me think like, man, maybe the becoming of Bob Marley also had a lot to do with maybe him not knowing his father. And even people I know who are religious, who potentially didn't grow up with a father, sometimes look for a father in a very spiritual sense, whether if it's Jesus, Allah, Buddha, Jah, Emperor Haile Selassie. And I started to think to myself, I wonder if that was sort of the gravitational pull that also, and they even showed that in the movie where he was talking to his spiritual leader, said like, hey, I didn't know my father, and he was just like, Selassie and Jah is your father, basically. So made me really think about the inner workings of Bob, what drove him, and maybe that absence or lack of attention from the father or that side of his family maybe is what also drove him further into this truth and this message of Rastafari and the messaging behind his music. The other thing that I want to highlight in terms of review of the movie, I definitely, at the end of the day, this movie is about Bob, but this movie is also about a love story and the commitment that Bob and Rita had towards one another. I know a lot of people criticize Bob for his extramarital affairs. Now, when it comes to relationships and so forth, and even listening to interviews of Bob and his opinions around marriage and relationships, I mean, it's really hard to say what sort of agreements or what sort of things they had going on. I know even through the film, which I did not know, that Rita had an affair, which I later looked it up, and she even had a kid while they were married with someone else, and Bob actually adopted that kid, and even I believe that kid took on the last name Marley. So it's really hard to say what was really going on, but I do appreciate them highlighting that aspect, because curious to know what was that dynamic kind of like. And it seems like despite whatever went on between them in a relationship, they both had a huge dedication to one another. So I thought it was a great thing that they did highlight that in the film. And I know some people critique and criticize Bob Marley's character for his actions, but regardless of what your opinions are on that, I just thought they did a good job at showing that in the movie, and showing their love for one another. And in terms of also his relationships, I know there was been some argument whether or not if they should have showed, I think Cindy Blackwell's her last name, but basically, who was Miss Jamaica at the time, who later ended up having a child with Bob Marley and gave birth to Damian Marley. And there were some people saying that maybe she should have had a larger role in the movie, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that would have added a different complexity to the movie and took the movie in a different direction that they maybe did not want it to go in. Another point in terms of the movie is like, yeah, going in knowing a little bit more about Bob Marley than maybe, I don't know, say the average person. There was always this critique that they should have shown more Bob Marley's revolutionary side beyond just this aspect of peace. But at the end of the day, kind of, if they want this movie to appeal to a large audience, maybe the more stronger revolutionary rhetoric of Bob Marley, where he talks about oppression, white supremacy, black liberation, repatriation back to Africa, statements like God is black and Emperor Haile Selassie is the second coming of Christ. I mean, they could have had that in the movie, but I think those that want to know that side of Bob, they're going to go find that. For example, when I first watched the movie, when it first came out, I was very interested about the books that he was reading in the movie. And 3 days later after I watched it, I tried to find on like Reddit or somewhere if somebody had mentioned the name of these books, and there was none. But after watching the movie the second time a month later, there was a Reddit thread where people named and mentioned those two books. One was about, I think, the autobiography of Emperor Haile Selassie, and the other one was a book by Marcus Garvey. But again, people that want to know and see that side, they're going to want to go see that. But to put that in a movie that is going to go global and they want to touch as many people as possible, I can see why they only or mainly led with this the peace side of Bob Marley. And they did mention it a little bit through like Mortimer Plano when they were on the beach, where he's like, God is black. Now some people would say that's a very intense statement, and they may agree or disagree, but I did think they showed a little bit of that, and his love for Africa, as he said, like when his manager was like, Africa has no infrastructure, and he said, well, then we'll build it. That was something that I think that Bob Marley heavily believed in the building up of Africa, so that people in the diaspora could eventually go back to Africa, being that he had a very Afrocentric mind state. So I mean, again, a biopic is hard to put everything in the movie, every aspect of a person in the movie, and you're just going to upset some people in the movie. But for those that want to know more, and as you dig into Bob Marley, it's not hard to find. In fact, I found an interview with him and Jacob Miller, and where he was just in a vibe that I had never seen before. I mean, he was really talking that talk. He was even cussing, really letting people know his beliefs and ideologies in this interview. I'll link it in the description below. But again, if you want to find that side of Bob, it's not that hard to find. If you know, for some people that felt like it could have been a little bit more revolutionary. But again, I feel like they were really trying to stick to a message of peace, which may also be intentional based on the geopolitical things that are happening right now in the world. And even in the news where they're mentioning that Jamaica murder rate is high and there's a lot of gang violence going on. So maybe, again, there was a further effort to push this message of peace and unity, to remind people to love one another. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think, whether if you agree with that or not, or if you felt like they should have added more of the revolutionary side to Bob in the film. Now, one of the next things I want to talk about is the casting of the film. Now, some people critiqued whether or not they should have added more Jamaicans, or they should have found a Jamaican to play Bob and to play Rita. But, I mean, there's a lot that goes into the movie, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot that goes into casting beyond just finding the person that can best look like Bob or the person that can best sound like Bob. Who knows what their requirements and things that they were looking for. But the fact that they found, I believe, Lashana Lynch and both Kingsley Benadir are both from the UK, and the UK has a strong influence of Caribbean influence, as you saw Bob in the movie even went to the UK, and even if you watch shows like Top Boy, a lot of the characters are of Jamaican and Caribbean descent. So if not Jamaica, I thought it was a decent move to at least find a UK person to play Bob and to play Rita in the film. Now, I will say that Kingsley Benadir is a lot larger than Bob Marley. Yeah, because Kingsley is over 6 feet tall, so, and he's also seems to be a lot more muscular than Bob. And then also, I guess in terms of a more precise critique, was that his voice when he was talking is a lot deeper than like the voice of the lip sync of Bob Marley singing some of the songs. Now, Kingsley did sing in terms of some minor scenes, but all the major singing songs were lip sync with Bob Marley's actual voice, which was at a lot higher pitch than Bob's. But that's just like just being really nitpicky if you want to talk about critique in terms of casting. But overall, again, I mean, a lot probably goes into making a movie like this in terms of the requirements of what they're looking for. And so in terms of casting, I mean, if not a Jamaican or somebody from the Caribbean, I feel like the next best place to potentially pull an actor to play some of these main characters would be the UK. Now, lastly, kind of my last observation of the movie is around it, especially when I first saw it, it did feel a little bit thin. It did feel a little bit anticlimactic, if I can speak right. And I was kind of thinking, well, what would I kind of want to see? Now, obviously, this is just my personal opinion. Again, I think the way the movie was done was great, but if I could add anything a little bit more, just overall thinking about some of my most favorite biopics, a lot of them are around like 2 hours, 30 minutes, and even in some cases pushing close to 3 hours. Now, I don't know what the budget was for this particular movie, if they had the sort of budget to make a movie of that length, but I do feel like the movie maybe could have been a little bit more impactful if they added maybe like 30 more extra minutes to the movie. I believe the movie was sitting around like an hour and 45 minutes, but I think if they would have added another 30 or 40, and within that 30 and 40, one thing that I would like to have seen is more of the emotional aspect of Bob in regards to particularly showing more around one area of his life that I felt they kind of, I would say, skim over a little bit, which was his battle with his mortality and finding out that he was diagnosed with cancer. Now, some would say that highlighting that too much might have taken away from this story of peace and unity. I know the message that they were trying to display was peace and unity, but in terms of giving us the rawness of his life, I think I would have wanted to see more scenes around him dealing with that, particularly in the fact that the way the movie ended with the One Love concert, and I believe he passed away about 3 years after that. But in terms of watching the Marley documentary, that last 3 years of his life is where what was kind of described as he kind of really kicked into high drive in terms of production of music and the production of pushing out his message, going to Africa, where I believe he performed. I forgot the country. I think it's Zimbabwe. Don't quote me on that. I don't think it was. I can't remember the African nation at that time that had just gained its independence, and he decided to put on a concert for that achievement, and they like tear gassed it, and he was just like really approaching life with a certain heightened sense of vigor, which he already had to begin with. And so I almost feel like, in terms of even if I was to compare it to other biopics, with Malcolm X, showing who Malcolm X was before he became Malcolm X, and even leading up to his assassination and how that affected his family, or watching Ray, a biopic around Ray Charles, him getting clean off of heroin, or Whitney Houston and her drug abuse, or even what's another by Bohemian Rhapsody, around Queen and watching Freddie Mercury get diagnosed with HIV AIDS and going to the clinic and having to deal with that and losing weight. And I feel like from a cinematic perspective and from a of the storytelling of his life, I almost feel like to bring the whole story full circle, I feel like if they would have, I would have appreciated seeing that. Yes, it would have been sad, but I think one thing that I really appreciate about Bob Marley is his need and obsession with truth. And I feel like, you know, he probably would have wanted, well, it's hard to say what anybody would want once they pass, but there's a level to which I think he maybe would have been okay with showing that side of his experience in life. And I think it also would have drove home the emotional aspect of this need for peace and unity, being that here's this individual, though revolutionary, though many things, but also more importantly preaching this message of peace and love and unity, and the fact that life is finite and anything can change at a drop of a dime. And that creates more of an urge that while we are here on this earth, that we need to promote love, harmony, and peace and unity amongst one another. And I like how they were adding in the clips from the concert and some of the clips and even interview clips of him, you know, towards the ending, and even in terms of showing more of who and how he handled dealing with cancer, and particularly in his story where he went to the doctor a second time in the United States, and that's when the doctor told him, like, hey, you have, you know, like 3 months to live. Maybe even going even into that far, even from a cinematic point, if Kingsley even went the extra mile to drop, say, 50, 60 pounds to look a little bit more frail and sickly, as if you look at the Bob Marley documentary, Marley, yeah, as you look at his life, that last 3 years, he definitely was losing weight. You could see it in his face. So to even take it to that extent, I think it would have just made the movie way more impactful, and also brought the movie full circle to see that. Now, that might have been difficult to produce, as Ziggy being his son. Like, you know, for those that have been following my channel, I lost my mother to cancer about 7 years ago. And so, you know, I'm pretty sure that grief stays with him to some degree, and it probably would be hard for Rita, who also played a role in making this movie, to produce that, or who knows, maybe they didn't have the budget, maybe they feel it would have taken away from this message of peace that they wanted to do. But just in my personal opinion, I feel like it would have just drove it home even further to see at least when I watched the documentary, based on what it seemed to be depicted in the documentary of how he handled that situation. Though in the movie we did see him crying in the room briefly and so forth, but to see the level of courage to continue to press forward despite knowing that he was sick, to continuously to perform, to continuously give it his all. As they said in the documentary, like, the last performance he ever did, he did like 4 encores, and they don't know how he found the strength to do that, right? And even in New York, while he was on his USA tour, he had a seizure. Like, I think it would have done the movie a little bit of justice to have shown that, and for people to have seen like the realness of the situation and the realness of his life and how he handled that, and the sort of courageousness in some of his last interviews as he's still preaching this message of hope, even though there may have been other intimate things and emotional things that he was maybe showing or displaying behind the interviews and behind the cameras, and even if they wanted to show that. Now, I will say that Kingsley mentioned in an interview, in the Breakfast Club interview, that they did several takes of the filming of him finding out he had cancer, and he said that there was a scene that they filmed where he did get very emotional and was crying, and he said in the interview that he didn't know if this was Bob's energy channeling through him, if these tears were but as I hear in a lot of these individuals that play in biopics, like, they're so entrenched in the character where it's almost like they do get a sensation of what the individual might have been feeling during ups and downs in their life, and that emotion comes out in a very natural way. So I almost would have had like to have seen that, because I do feel like the scene of when we found out he had cancer was kind of like, it was I don't know, it could have happened like that, I don't know, again, you know, but I almost feel like for the theatrical purposes, to add more of that emotional element, especially around his mortality, could have drove the message of need for peace and unity while you are on this earth, could have went a long way. And then lastly, I will say is that Kingsley did mention that they filmed about 4 hours worth of footage, and the movie came out to be around like I think a minute and 40, almost close to a minute 50. I would like to see a director's cut. Later on down the line, they put it maybe on streaming platforms. It's another way to bring in income for the Marley brand estate, or maybe even for his foundation. But yeah, I would maybe like to see, even if it's not as smooth in terms of the storyline that we saw in the movie, but yeah, I wouldn't mind like a close to a 3 hour movie. But that's just me as a fan of Bob Marley. Obviously, the more content, the more information, the more story that we can see on the big screen of Bob Marley, I would enjoy and appreciate. And I feel like a lot of people would maybe enjoy a director's cut, where if they did film anything past wanting to show his life after the One Love Peace concert, or even showing his life in dealing with cancer, if they did film that, I mean, I would like to see that. And just personally, as I was saying, I do feel like maybe showing either in a compilation type format of what his life was like after that One Love Peace concert, as a lot of he produced a lot of groundbreaking albums, did his tour in Africa, started his tour in the United States until he fell ill. But that's just me. But overall, let me know if you agree, disagree. Let me know what you thought about the movie. Let me know your appreciation for Bob Marley. Again, check out my Jamaican vlogs, where I go to places like Trenchtown, 9 Mile, the Bob Marley House and Museum, to learn a little bit more about Bob Marley. If you're interested in that, definitely check out my Jamaica travel blog. But until next time, peace and one love.